Greetings, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm Johanna, and I'm the Public Programs Manager at SAMA. Without further ado, here is Sean Yuan, SAMA's Associate Curator for Asian Art.
Thank you. Thanks, Johanna. Good evening and welcome. Tonight, we have two very distinguished speakers joining us. One is Professor Jason Jackson from Indiana University, and another speaker is Professor Lijun Zhang from George Mason University. They will speak about several ethnic minority groups of Southwest China with a special focus on their traditional arts that still remains important to these groups of people today. Tonight's talk is drawn from their travels and researches in China's 3 provinces since 2013. Tonight's lecture is part of the programming for the exhibition Exquisite Adornment, Turkoman and Miao jewelry from the Elizabeth and Robert Landy collection. This exhibition is currently on view in our museum through January 3rd. This lecture was made possible by generous support from the Louis A. and Francis B. Wagner Lecture Fund. Let me first introduce Professor Zhang, formerly curator for Folklife and Cultural Heritage at Guangxi Museum of Nationalities. Dr. Lijun Zhang is now an Assistant Professor of Folklore at George Mason University. She is a specialist in art and architecture of China. With Marsha MacDowell, she was the co-editor of the catalogue Quilts of Southwest China and also the co-curator for the exhibition. She's also an author of Chinese folk arts and crafts and also several other publications. Now let me introduce Professor Jackson. Professor Jackson previously served as the director of the Martha's Museum of World Cultures. Currently, he is the Ruth Ann Hawes Professor of Folklore and Anthropology at Indiana University. He is the editor of Material Vernaculars, Objects, Images, and Their Social Worlds, and also the author of Yuchi's Ceremonial Life. Together, Professor Zhang and Professor Jackson curated an exhibition, Putting Baskets to Work in Southwest China. Without further ado, let me turn the screen to Professor Jackson first.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. And Lijun and I are very glad that you're here for tonight's talk. We have a division of labor in which I'll present the lecture, and then Lijun will take the lead in answering your questions at the end. So welcome. One other thing, the way that we're going to present the lecture is in the form of a series of questions that you might ask us if we were sitting together in an airport terminal or a bus station and you were wondering about life in Southwest China. So on your behalf, we'll start with some questions, but be sure to take down the questions you want to ask for yourself at the end and send them to Johanna. So here we go. So first off, who are we and what is the basis for our remarks, Lijun and I? Expertise is a relative thing, and here at the start, we want to give you some sense of who we are and what this foundation for our talk will be. Lijun's parents are farmers, and she was raised in a rural community in Fujian province in southeastern China. That background has been of tremendous value in her studies as a folklorist, working both in her home province and in the regions of the Southwest China that we'll speak of today. Lijun studied as an undergraduate and a graduate student at Beijing Normal University and earned her doctorate in folklore at Indiana University. She's a specialist in the study of China. My roots are in the southern United States, and my primary area of study as a folklorist and anthropologist concerns the native peoples of this region. My connections to China emerged from work with Chinese graduate students and became more substantive in 2013 when, as the director of the Mathers Museum, I and that museum collaborated in a large binational project linking 6 US and Chinese museums in a partnership within a broader project of the Chinese and American folklore societies. That project involved work, including museum exhibitions in both the US and China, and here we draw upon the Chinese side of the effort. Since 2014, we've traveled together and with our project partners to a large number of rural communities in southwest of China. In addition to this experience working together, Lijun also served, as you just heard, as a curator at the Guangxi Museum of Nationalities. And in that role, she was involved separately in additional research and travel among the minority ethnic groups of Guangxi province. The images that we'll share and our comments on the peoples of this region draw upon these experiences, especially our work on heritage issues and on textiles. We have many excellent colleagues with deeper knowledge of these topics than we have, but we're honored to share some of what we've learned with you. So what do we need to know about China here at the start? China is a vast nation with an extraordinarily deep history, one measured not in hundreds, but in thousands of years. That historical depth can lead one to emphasize continuity rather than discontinuity in Chinese history. This emphasis on continuity tends to become even more pronounced when discussing peoples who come to be categorized as indigenous, both in the West and in China itself. Indigenous peoples are often seen as, for instance, being less oriented towards change, more concerned with preserving traditions, and more connected to the environment. There may sometimes be truth in such generalizations, but they can also get in our way, and they can cause special problems for those who they're used to characterize. While we urge you to think about China as a diverse place with a deep and continuous history, we also urge you to simultaneously consider it to be a place that has undergone extraordinary change, especially over the past century. Developments like the end of imperial rule and the birth of the People's Republic of China and the civil war that preceded it had profoundly transformative impacts in Southwest China as throughout the country. The Cultural Revolution, the more recent period of opening up, and the dramatic economic, technological, environmental, and societal changes seen in China over the past 60 years have similarly dramatically reshaped life, including for the Miao and their neighbors. In the system of governance established by the founders of the People's Republic of China after October 1949, a formal role in government was developed for China's ethnic minority groups, sometimes called nationalities, within the state. That led to the classification and recognition of and official naming of such peoples as the Miao, the Yao, Dong, and Bai, and to the creation of jurisdictions in which the local majority status of minority peoples would be recognized and taken into account. Thus, Guangxi is today formally known as the Guangxi Zhuang Autonomous Region. We'll share pictures from the Dali Bai Autonomous Prefecture. We've worked in Sanjiang Dong Autonomous County, and we miss our friends in Lihu Yao Ethnic Township. So where is Southwest China? Southwest China does not refer to a fixed region. According to Chinese government bureaus, the region includes Guizhou Province, Yunnan Province, Sichuan Province, Chongqing Municipality, and the Tibet Autonomous Region. In the more recent effort for development strategies in China's West, the Guangxi Zhuang Autonomous Region has also come to be regarded as part of Southwest China. Culturally, and this is our focus here, Southwest China can refer to the provinces of Yunnan, Guizhou, Guangxi, and Hainan, where ethnic minority culture is very diverse, and at the same time, these diverse peoples are networked with one another across a wide expanse and where they share much in common. We conducted our ethnographic research in adjacent areas of Guizhou, Yunnan, and Guangxi, and we've not yet traveled to the Tibet Plateau or the Sichuan Basin. In connection with both our talk and the Exquisite Adornment exhibition, it's important to note the cultural similarities and historical ties linking the peoples of Southwest China, particularly its upland regions, to the peoples in the Southeast Asian mainland. When the exhibition labels mention hill tribes, for instance, in Southeast Asia, that phrase refers to farming peoples whose lives share many features with the Chinese minority nationalities whose arts we'll be discussing. In some cases, these peoples and the peoples of Southwest China are actually closely related by language and history. So what is Southwest China like? The Southwest is very diverse in terms of culture, ethnicity, economy, and geographical features. Domestically and internationally, as the most ethnically diverse region in China, the Southwest is often regarded as an exotic area, and with rich ethnic cultures and unique environmental and geographic features. While we're speaking of Southwest China in shorthand here, our focus is on rural mountainous areas where minority nationalities groups such as the Miao are prominent. Southwest China is also home to huge cities, lowland areas, and in Guangxi, seacoasts that we're not really touching on today. It is also home to many people of China's majority Han nationality. Economically, this region is less developed when compared to the more prosperous eastern and northern Chinese regions. Most of the ethnic minority communities in the Southwest live in areas dominated by small-scale agriculture. However, like other parts of China, the region is also experiencing massive social, demographic, and economic changes. As you'll see in some of our images, the Southwest of China is also very beautiful. That beauty is one factor motivating extensive tourism in the region. Its cultural diversity is another factor promoting travel there. In an overall way, who are the peoples of China's Southwest? The region is home to many of China's ethnic minorities, including the Miao people featured in the Exquisite Adornment exhibition. Historically, the term Bai Mao, which means 100 Miao, or Miao Man, which means Miao barbarians, was a general term used to refer to the non-Han minority groups in the Southwest. Under the current official classification, the largest minority groups or nationalities in the region are the Zhuang, with a population of nearly 17 million, and the Miao, with a population of more than 9 million. Within Yunnan province, there are 25 ethnic minority groups who have lived in the area for generations. Similarly diverse, there are 18 nationalities in Guizhou and 11 in Guangxi. Many of the ethnic groups have distinctive subgroups. For instance, the Miao can be further divided as the red Miao, the black Miao, the longhorn Miao, the flowery Miao, etc. These subgroups speak different dialects and can be culturally very different. The relationship and classification of ethnic groups is complex, and being classified or identified under different ethnic group names does not necessarily mean that the groups are unrelated. For instance, the Miao are related in language and share other cultural features with the Yao people. The Bhuyi see themselves as sharing a common history with the Zhuang. American audiences are often interested to know that some, but not all Miao people in China identify as Hmong and speak the Hmong language. Thus, they share this background with Hmong peoples in various Southeast Asian nations and with Hmong and Hmong American people in the United States. While we draw here on our travels among the Miao, Yao, Dong, Zhong, Bai, and Bhuyi people in Yunnan, Guizhou, and Guangxi, we want to stress that these and other minority groups with whom they share cultural, historical, and linguistic ties can sometimes be found in adjacent provinces, Hunan, for instance, and in the Southeast Asian nations. Inversely, these are just some of the groups that can be found in the three provinces that we have visited and worked in. So how do these different groups interact today and in the past? Each of the groups that we're mentioning have distinctive histories and traditions. Due to the historical factors such as uneven government policy towards the ethnic groups in this border region during the Ming and Qing dynasties, a hierarchical relationship formed between the Han, Dong, Miao, and Yao people that has had long-lasting impacts on their lives. Our local collaborator, Mr. Yang Guangzhong, who is Dong and the director of the Sanjiang Dong Museum in northern Guangxi, introduced us to how the power relationship among the ethnic groups impacted their living locations. The Han occupy the flatlands. The Dong live by the riverbanks. The Miao and Yao live further upland in the hills. The Han and Dong people, as the historically more powerful groups in this part of the region, seized the land in the valleys and drove the Miao and Yao up to the higher land, characterized by harsher living environments and less farming land. Such patterns remain visible on the landscape today. During our visits, we observed the distinctions as well as interactions and connections among some of the minority groups of the region. Locals like Mr. Yang can tell them apart, these groups apart by the features of their clothing and hairstyle. The basket store owner in Tongla, Mr. Su Chenchang, who is Dong himself, informed us of the different baskets that his Miao and Dong customers need and prefer. A master basket maker in eastern Guizhou, Mr. Shi Jingku, can recognize the different baskets made by different ethnic groups in the neighboring areas based on their style and functions. So what is life like in this rural part of the Southwest? Agriculture and agricultural lifestyles still dominate in the mountains of the Southwest. Many people do handicrafts during the winter when they're not occupied with farming work. Across the region, there's usually a market day in a local town center every 3 or 5 days for people from the surrounding areas to buy practical utensils and also to sell their farm products and handcrafts. Nowadays, some members of the ethnic minority communities are relocated to the lower lands due to infrastructure development or other policy-oriented reasons. Even when they remain at home, some communities encounter a greater number of outsiders due to the development of tourism. Community members, especially the younger generations, are also becoming connected via the internet to other cultures and peoples. It's not uncommon today for us to see folk artists borrowing and adapting styles from other cultures and to recast their work to appeal to outsiders. A village in the Southwest today is a place where one can sometimes find a smartphone charging in a very old earthen-floored vernacular house lit with only a single fluorescent bulb, and where the household may produce much of its own food and clothing by hand. A city in the Southwest is a place where one can find new apartments in which urban workers pull their Miao and Bai clothes out of the closet during a day off to gather in city parks and sing songs and dance the dances of their home villages. So the Miao people are the star of the Exquisite Adornment exhibition. So who are they? Earlier, we observed that all the nationalities of Southwest China were once referred to as Miao. This is one factor that has shaped confusion about who the Miao people are. That older history and the confusions that it shaped was reshaped again at the start of the People's Republic of China when the new government sought to group different non-Han people into a relatively manageable number of distinct peoples to whom political recognition would be bestowed. It was this process in the early years of the PRC that formalized the system of 56 nationalities of whom the Han constitute the majority of China's people, but the Miao represent one of the largest minority nationalities. The related but not the same people classified as Miao speak multiple different languages and regional dialects, and they live in Guizhou, Guangxi, Yunnan, but also Hunan, Sichuan, and Hubei. In light of our interest here, we note that almost everywhere the Miao are famous for the elaborateness and beauty of their silver ornaments and the intricacy of their gorgeous embroidery. While those two arts combine, especially in the flamboyant national festival dress of Miao women, men are most often silversmiths and women are most often textile artists. Emblematic of this combination is a husband and wife, each master artists in these two disciplines, whom we met in the Miao township of Shidong in Guizhou, We will introduce you to Mr. Wu Shui and Miss Long Guizhou shortly when we touch on the arts that they practice. In addition to the Miao people, which other groups are we really talking about here? As we mentioned earlier, our travels with Chinese and American colleagues have introduced us not only to Miao communities, but also to Dong, Yao, Zhuang, and Bhuyi ones. We've already been sharing images related to all of these groups, and we'll touch on their arts in just a moment, particularly those of the Dong, Yao, and Bai, among whom our studies have been most detailed. The Bai people are mostly found in Yunnan province, around Erhai Lake, and in regions to the north on the old caravan routes to Tibet. The Yao community that has welcomed us are the white trouser Yao people of Nandan County in Nandan County in northwest Guangxi. The Dong communities where we work are on either side of the border, separating southeast Guizhou and northeast Guangxi. All of these people boast extraordinarily rich textile traditions that are rooted in the form and aesthetics of their community-specific dress practices. And this map shows the locations in which we've been working with the little stars and squares. Among the many arts practiced by the Miao and their neighbors, which ones are we going to give you a glimpse of today? Our knowledge of all of the arts and crafts of the Southwest are as uneven as is our familiarity with the peoples of this huge region. Just as we are better acquainted with some peoples, some arts are better known to us also. There are arts and crafts that we will pass over for lack of firsthand experience with them, and there are also those that we'll set aside because no survey like this can hope to be complete. Examples of important forms that we'll omit include paper cutting, seen here, a practice that both stands alone and is an adjunct to embroidery as a pattern making technique. Another omission that are the so-called farmer paintings of this region. These are works on paper featuring beautiful images of cultural life. They stand alone as a compelling form of self-documentation, but they've also have a history of use in national, political, and social messaging. Blacksmithing, musical instrument making, and many other expressive practices, food most certainly, are set aside for today. Doing so makes room for those that we'll touch on. Given the exhibition's focus, we'll begin with silverwork, then turn to fabric arts that accompany silverwork. We'll then touch more briefly on ceramics and woodworking before turning to our own special interests, basketry and architecture. So finally, what about silverwork? As mentioned, the artist most relevant to the Exquisite Adornment exhibition with whom we've met in our travels and studies is Mr. Wu Shui, a master Miao silversmith from a town famous for its smiths, Shidong in Taijing County, Guizhou. Mr. Wu produces adornments of the type worn mostly by women, including the sophisticated and exquisite silver crown, flower crown, and silver horn or silver wing that women wear on their heads during special occasions. You'll see some in a moment. He comes from a family of silversmiths, and the skill has been passed down in his family for 8 generations. Taught by his father, Mr. Wu has been a silversmith for more than 20 years, and he continues the tradition by teaching the skill to the younger generation in his village. He owns a workshop in his home, which is also officially designated as a silverwork apprentice center and as a reception center for tourists in Taijing County. Mr. Wu showed us his workshop and the tools that he uses for the production of silver and jewelry, stressing for us that the making of silver ornaments requires a craftsman to be extra patient and attentive, as it's refined work that involves more than a dozen distinct processes. The silver ornaments of the different subgroups of Miao vary from place to place, and many feature unique styles, patterns, and production techniques. Later, like some other silversmiths in Shidong, Mr. Wu's silverwork is known for the technique of fabricating very thin silver wires. The delicate wires are then curled in circles to form different patterns. Material objects such as silver ornaments and clothing are an important way for people to express their cultural and regional identity in the Southwest. Although commercially manufactured items are beginning to become more commonly used in everyday situations. During festivals and ceremonial occasions, Miao women dress up and wear elaborate silver jewelry and ancestral clothing styles to continue their tradition, and in contexts such as touristic performance to express their identity. Before we were shown his dim workshop, we visited Mr. Wu's family store in a much brighter room of his house, one that showcases his silver jewelry and his wife, Guangxu's textiles. On his silver crowns, hair ornaments, clasps, pins, neck hoops, earrings, and bracelets, we saw traditional patterns and motifs that are similar to those used in her textile works, including butterflies, fish, phoenix, dragon, flowers, and geometric patterns. These are the traditional patterns and motifs that we can see on the silver ornaments displayed in the Exquisite Adornment exhibition and in the best of the works visible in provincial and national museums in China. To accommodate his new customers, many of whom are cultural outsiders brought in by tourism, Mr. Wu also designs new patterns and styles, such as a pair of silver earrings and lantern shape that Lijun bought in his gallery. Miao silversmiths are prominent in the production of the kinds of silver ornaments for which the Miao are famous, but that are also used to varying degrees by other groups. This other groups aspect points us to the fact that all of the kinds of works that we are discussing have the capacity to circulate in multi-ethnic and multinational ways. An example of this can be found in the very different silverwork arts of the Bai people in Northwest Yunnan. We learned of such work in the village of Shizazi in Heqing County. Here, the primary consumers of Bai silverwork have long been Tibetan Buddhists. Bai silver artists produce ritual offering bowls and other objects used in religious devotion. In understanding this trade, it's important to know about the historical horse and tea road and other caravan routes that knitted Southwest China into a larger world that included not only what is today the countries of Southeast Asia, but also the vast Tibetan settlement region, which extends into Yunnan. A Bai master, such as Chung Guangwei, must know and teach these forms central to the Tibetan trade, but he and they also make works, tea sets in particular, that are aimed at urban buyers from Beijing and beyond. So what about fabric arts? Textile works are very visible in both ethnic minorities' daily lives and on special occasions in the communities that we visited. Handmade pleated skirts are hung up to dry in Baiku Yao villages in Nandan. Older ladies were doing embroidery in front of their houses in Liping. In Kangjiang, we encountered Dong people doing small batch indigo dye work by the riverside, and Bai tie-dye work being done in a formerly state-owned workshop in Dali. Hand-weaving fabrics and supplies for indigo dyeing and embroidery are commonly sold in open-air markets across the region. Even though mass-produced textile items are becoming more and more common, traditionally made clothes and other fabric items are still widely used by the ethnic minority peoples, especially among older generations. Making traditional textiles is a common practice then in many communities. Some more skilled and knowledgeable individuals stand out and are recognized by local villagers and by the government as master artists. One of the masters whom we have visited in this region is Hu Jinsho, a Baiku Yao artist from Wali village. Miss Hu is skilled in weaving, drawing resist patterns with tree sap on fabric, indigo dyeing, and doing elaborate embroidery. In her house, a loom made by her husband, Li Xingming, occupies a big part of her living room. Every family in her village has such a loom. Most Baiku families also raise mulberry silkworms to make a paper-like silk that is used as for the decorative band at the bottom part of a Baiku Yao pleated skirt. Unlike Miss Hu, who makes traditional textiles mainly for her own family's use, the Dong master textile artists Wei Qinghua and Yang Tian, who are sisters-in-law in Tongla, run a Dong embroidery museum in their home and a textile store in the local market. These embroidery experts said that most of their customers are locals rather than outsiders. Some local women go to work in the cities and do not themselves make traditional costumes anymore. When they come back home for festivals and ceremonies, they'll buy the Dong national dress items that they need for these occasions from Miss Wei and Miss Young. However, not all of the people who move to the cities discontinue making traditional textiles. The Zhuang master artist Wang Biyu brought her textile skills from a small Zhuang village in Longlin to Nanning, the capital city of Guangxi. Born in 1983, Miss Wang was employed by a tour agency in Nanning at the age of 22. At 25, a year after she got married, she quit her job at the tour agency and started to spend more time on weaving, dyeing, embroidery, and quilt making in Nanning. She seeks mentorship from her mother and grandmother to master the skills necessary to make beautiful traditional textiles, including the quilt you see here. A combination of love for her ethnic culture and concern for its future motivates her to make traditional textiles, even though she lives far away from her hometown. All right, what about ceramics? Like woodworking, to which we turn next, our knowledge of ceramics is limited given the focus of our research project on textiles, including basketry. The pottery workshop where our team has spent the most time is the Dong Yucheng Black Pottery in Tianma Village in Dianman Town in Zhenshan County, Yunnan. Mr. Dong is a Bai potter and the master of a workshop that bears his name. When we visited, the master was traveling and we interviewed one of his apprentices named Chen Yao. Mr. Dong and his apprentices produced two kinds of pottery works at their large studio and gallery. They make in wood fire elegant blackware storage jars, bowls, vases, and tea ceremony sets that are rooted in local styles and that appeal both locally and to collectors beyond the region. They also produce a signature object that is iconic of Bai culture. These are the sculptural figures known in English translation as tile cats. In their classic form, tile cats sit on a curved base that is sized to match roof tiles that are made to run along the ridge line of a classic Bai house. On this base sits an engaging and beloved cat-like creature with distorted features, particularly staring eyes and large mouths. When used architecturally, tile cats are the auspicious guardians of a family home. Increasingly, though, tile cats have become collector's items for visitors to the region, which has led to modifications in their form, such as replacing the roof-friendly base with one more suited for display indoors. We wish we could share a richer account of pottery. In our travels, among the most important pottery forms that we encounter are often jars, sometimes really large jars, used in the household production of rice wine. So what about woodworking? Woodworking can be represented in this context by the work of the Bai carver named Shi Jiashun, who also lives and works in Dianmen Town in Jinshan County, north of Dali in Yunnan. From a famed woodworking community of long standing, Mr. Shi's practice is rooted in the local tradition of making and carving fine furniture and architectural elements such as doors and window shutters. Woodworking was shifted during the post-1949 economic upheavals brought about by nationalization of industry and the suppression of vernacular culture that was at its peak during the Cultural Revolution. But today, expressive woodworking is again a vital concern in the Dali area. Mr. Shi can and does make traditional forms. This is an essential requirement of his official status as a recognized intangible cultural heritage master. But he also produces new kinds of work rooted in, but going beyond traditional forms. These include bas-relief carvings featuring landscapes and abstract designs. While this sort of woodworking in particular needs further study, we note Mr. Shi's connection to architectural woodworking. It is in architecture and the associated craft of furniture making that we've seen abundant evidence of skilled woodwork across the Southwest. Before turning to architecture, we consider a technique and a discipline that shares much with both weaving and woodworking, one that is also present in architecture. What about basketry? We have to warn you that you're at risk. We're now writing a book about bamboo baskets in the region. If you were to let us, we could talk about basketry all night. In our project, we're considering basketry in 5 complementary ways. 3 of these are usually at the heart of any study of material objects in our field. We are thus addressing making, circulating, and using baskets. Our other 2 chapters look at basketry collecting and at exhibitions as the special instances of circulating and using. The main point that we would make for you today is that, unlike in many other parts of the world, in the uplands of Southwest China, baskets in a wondrous variety of forms are still made, given, sold, bought, and used in an extraordinary range of contexts. Hujin Shu, the master Yao textile artist in Nandan County, she possesses 67 baskets in her home, and she uses for an even greater number of purposes. Su Chen Chan, the Dong basket shop owner in Tongla, stocks 41 different types of baskets to serve his Dong, Miao, and Yao clientele. To do this, he purchases from local makers, such as his neighbor Cheng Fuyuying, but he also travels throughout the region, sometimes visiting villages where the entire community specializes in producing a handful of forms for a regional market. While there is such specialization, we've also met generalists, such as the Bai basket maker Wang Juyen. Mr. Wang and his family produce a wide selection of baskets essential for the work of their farming neighbors. While we have documented hundreds of types of baskets used for a just incredible range of purposes, we note that baskets, practical purposes, we also note that baskets play a key role in social and spiritual life. Baskets here in the Southwest are used in a variety of ways within ceremonies, including rites used in honoring ancestors. They also play a key role at the heart of marriage ceremonies, where they are central to gift exchanges of food that help join 2 families together. So what about architecture? As with the other traditional art and craft practices that we've been introducing, architecture among the minority peoples of upland Southwest China evokes stories of both continuity and change. Spectacularly beautiful and distinctive architecture is one of the magnets that draws visitors to the region, underpinning the rise there of a heritage tourism economy. But even in villages and towns without such visitors, minority nationalities communities are often quite proud of and eager to maintain their signature architectural styles. These are buildings that are adapted to local conditions in materials and styles, and are in styles that are the product of centuries of cultural development. Yet that story of continuity runs alongside one of discontinuity also, changing social dynamics, including government rural development policies, the complex history of economic reorganization since 1949, present-day rural to urban migration, and changing material lives in an ongoing era of electrification and digital networking, all shape the landscape in the mountains of Yunnan, Guizhou, and Guangxi. These matters are beyond our mandate here, but we do want to share with you a glimpse of the architecture in the places where the objects in exquisite adornment come from. You've been looking at the architecture and landscape of a Miao community known as Baisha in southeast southeast Guizhou. Baisha is surrounded by many Dong communities, and it shares some of the styles of wooden architecture common among them. A second Miao community can be seen here, located in southwest Guizhou. This is the Longhorn Miao community of Saoja. Saoja is the home to China's first eco-museum. Perhaps the most famous architectural forms in this region are the covered bridges and community centers in tower form of the Dong people. Here we illustrate these two kinds of buildings with images from southeast Guizhou. While building in wood is prominent in the region, there are also masonry building traditions, as among the Bhuyi people. Here we share some images from the Bhuyi village of Gaodung in southwest Guizhou. I'm getting nostalgic for these places I miss. Connecting to our interest in basketry, we point out the ways that woven bamboo is used in simpler architectural features, such as fences and gates, but also in impressive buildings, such as the round granaries of the Baiku Yao in northern Guangxi. Finally, in Yunnan, the Bai people have their own form of the courtyard house, common elsewhere in China. It consists of 3 connected buildings enclosed by a 4th screening wall. All right, so how are these objects that we've been talking about activated in the performing arts of the Miao and their neighbors? Hopefully everyone listening will have the chance to safely see the remarkable silverwork in the Exquisite Adornment exhibition. When you do, think about it worn on the human body, together with embroidered garments of extraordinary detail and beauty. Imagine those wearing such clothing and silver adornment gathered in a large groups and moving together in festival dances in a village or a town plaza. Imagine the haunting sound of the lusheng, an instrument made of multiple bamboo pipes fitted with single reeds played with a blowing tube that is said to emulate and complement the human voice. You deserve a second talk, one accompanied by sound and video and delivered by a specialist to gain appreciation for our point. Music, dance, ceremony, festive meals, and all the other modes of expressive performance found among the peoples of the Southwest are bound up with the architecture of places and with objects, including the kinds of objects we've been discussing, but also including many that we've not touched on, such as musical instruments and food. Even as we placed such objects under glass in museum exhibitions, we've struggled to help preserve awareness in our audiences that these objects, often beautiful and engaging when viewed alone, were meant to be experienced as part of multimedia assemblages, whose power derives from combination, juxtaposition, and human action. This is true for silver jewelry worn on special occasions for sure, but it's even true for humbler objects, such as the specialized baskets that Lijun Zhang has attached to either side of her loom to hold her shuttles when weaving. Those baskets were meant to attach to a loom, and with the weaver, her thread, and her knowledge form a complex system. That system produces the clothes worn both in daily life and in festival dances and in funeral ceremonies. So, do outsiders collect the arts of the Miao and other peoples of the Southwest? Yes, yes. While we have not learned about their collection ourselves yet, clearly Elizabeth and Robert Lindy are not alone in their appreciation of the arts of the minority nationalities of Southwest China. While the actual situation is more complicated, we would observe that interest in collecting roughly breaks down along lines that are common in non-Western traditional arts and common for non-Western traditional arts and crafts in other parts of the world. Forms that are aesthetically dense and markedly distinctive, such that people from whom they derive can be guessed in the absence of documentation, are prominent among private collectors with primarily aesthetic interests. In this mode, Chinese Miao embroidery and silverwork, along with the embroidery and silverwork of related Hmong peoples in Southeast Asia, became particularly appealing to collectors. Cognate textile arts, usually older, decontextualized, and anonymous from other Southwest China peoples, especially the Gaodung and Zhuang, are also collected privately in a similar way. In the current era, though, one in which formal master designations have been bestowed upon talented artists who get written about, featured in documentary videos, and who teach huge numbers of apprentices within a formal and tangible cultural heritage system, a new dynamic has arisen, one comparable to that found today in the United States in relationship to contemporary Native American artists. A new kind of collector in China and sometimes beyond is eager to collect works from known and named artists who are officially recognized and well documented. This scenario is found throughout Southwest China, but it's most obvious in the case of the Bai potters, silversmiths, and wood carvers whom we've met. There's less Chinese and international collecting of anonymous Bai works of the past, but contemporary Bai masters in these genres have good markets for their work. Basketry is a contrastive example. It's not a beloved genre among collectors, although there are a small number of enthusiasts that can be found. Baskets are seen in Southwest China and beyond as utility objects, despite their formal beauty and the high level of skill that basketry demands. Very few basket makers have been recognized in China as masters, and baskets belong to a large category of objects that are generally not collected, that are collected not by individuals or by art museums, but instead by museums of ethnography, such as those with whom we've been associated. Some of our work is aimed at sorting out differences in appreciation of the sort that we here evoke. So how is life changing in Southwest China? We've evoked some of the changes unfolding there already, cultural heritage tourism being an important one for many, but not all communities and peoples. We've mentioned economic and technological changes also. To these, we would add particular Chinese efforts to develop robust transportation infrastructure. When Americans visit this region, they never fail to note the degree to which very impressive superhighways now knit the region together and connect it to the larger nation. This is no small matter in this mountainous region. Traveling between cities in the Southwest can mean an incredible amount of time passing through really long tunnels that carry major highways beneath major mountains. Last year, we traveled by high-speed rail directly from Guangzhou, a city that's 49 times as large as Houston, to a cluster of Dong villages where we have studied. Long considered remote, Southwest China is increasingly very connected. This fact ties into both tourism as a specific economic development strategy, as well as to the broader incorporation of the region into the national and international economy. So what is the role of government heritage policies in the Southwest? In the context of the diminishment or even threat of disappearance of some heritage practices, including some handcrafts, the Chinese government has been implementing policies for the protection and transmission of traditional culture. Recall the silversmith whom we introduced previously. Mr. Wu's practice of silversmithing is now part of the government's promotion of traditional culture. On the wall of Mr. Wu's living room are photos of Miao people wearing traditional costumes, government officials visiting his workshop, and of his visits to places in but also beyond Guizhou province, including Beijing and the Taipei Tourism Exhibition in Taiwan, where he demonstrated and promoted Miao silverwork. A similar display of images reflect his wife's expanding career and wider connections. The Dong textile artists Miss Wei and Miss Yang in Tongla also have such a photo wall displayed in their home and textile museum. Such displays, like the plaques that grace their doors and entryways, testify to the transformations that government heritage policy is having for some, but we want to stress not all artists. In addition to promoting traditional arts to people near and far, the master artists also participate in apprenticeship practices. Mr. Wu breaks the taboo of not passing his skill to apprentices outside his own family. And today he teaches silverwork to the younger villagers who want to learn from him regardless of family ties. The Baiku Yao master textile artist Miss Hu similarly teaches embroidery and resist dyeing to the village girls attending the local primary school. The regional, national, and even international promotion of intangible cultural heritage plays an important role in the preservation, documentation, and study and continuity of many handcraft traditions in Southwest China. In addition to informal learning of crafts, skills, in daily life, the new Intangible Cultural Heritage, or ICH efforts, facilitate the more institutionalized teaching and learning of traditional culture and skills. Finally, how do the arts and objects of the Miao and their neighbors fit into museums, including your museum? In keeping with a more general emphasis found still in many museums, in China, there tends to be a bias towards older objects. On average, a Chinese museum would rather have an old example of an object type, even if it has less documentation, than a new, well-documented example. Museums are relatively new institutions in China, but the museum sector has grown rapidly and dramatically. Chinese museums have tried, in a way, to make up for lost time by collecting very extensively with an eye on antique works. Private donation to Chinese museums is rare. New museums have been seeking out older objects and collections to purchase. In the US, only a relative small number of museums have collections from the Miao and the other peoples of Southwest China. In accord with art museum norms, most US museums that do have such collections have acquired them as gifts from private collectors. The museum partnership of which we are a part has led to the building of new ethnographic field collections by the 3 US partners, but we are unaware of any other North American museums collecting actively in communities as we've been doing. Given that international visits to China only began in the 1970s, it's likely that American museums will benefit greatly from the bestowal of private American collections in the decades ahead. With that thought in mind, we can conclude our formal remarks by noting, in a celebratory way, the information conveyed in announcements for the Exquisite Adornment exhibition. There we read that, quote, to honor the 40th anniversary of the San Antonio Museum of Art in 2021, longtime supporters Elizabeth and Robert Lindy have promised the museum their outstanding collection of silver jewelry, unquote. On behalf of all who appreciate the cultural significance and artistry of such works, we add our thanks to the museums.
I hope everyone has a really great evening. Thank you again. All right, bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, everyone.